Today's show is the bridge from fall camp to game week. We're talking takeaways from the fall camp intel over at ScoopDuck. Plus, to win a championship, you need difference makers. Just how many dudes are on the Ducks 2025 squad? We are so close to the season, we can taste it. I'm serving it up Tillamook style on this edition of That Show Out West.
This place has everything. In fact, the grass is damn green in Eugene.
That performance deserves a holy wallawa.
It's a feeling you cannot explain.
This place is louder than any other venue in the Big Ten.
This program is staged to compete and to win championships.
Welcome to the Big Ten, Oregon.
Welcome to That Show Out West for That Team Out West. I'm Ted LaRue. You know, for the last handful of weeks, maybe you've been reading your favorite website or you've been watching the under construction fall camp documentary. We've been taking in a lot of fall camp lately, and then you kind of turn around and you look over here just beyond the distance. You see the Montana State Bobcats coming into town. You see Autzen Stadium. You see game week. But to get from point A to point B, you got to cross that bridge. And now we are stepping onto this bridge, and this show is going to get us from one point to another. And next week, we are going to be talking about game number one. Next week, we are going to be talking about week number one. And with that on the horizon, now is as good a time as ever, folks, to smash that subscribe button and be dialed into everything I've got cooking up here on TSOW. And trust me, there is a lot. So you know when shows are dropping, so you know when posts are dropping, so you know when videos are dropping, so you can stay within the TSOW community. Subscribing is the best way for you to do that. And we've also got special memberships, additional benefits here as well within the TSOW YouTube community, getting TSOW's earlier than everybody else, being a part of the exclusive TSOW group chat on the TSOW Talk and Text line, as well member shout-outs during these shows. Make sure you click the join button if you're on YouTube and check those out to support the show and to get a little bit of a extra along with it as well. Also follow Instagram, TikTok, at Ted on the Ducks, over on Twitter. Content on each of these platforms is all just a little bit different. So being dialed into as many as possible will certainly keep you up to date. We are 1 week away, folks. We are 7 days away. This ends the countdown, okay? Because, once you're within a week, it's, you focus on what's at hand here coming up next Saturday. But 7 days from now, that post-game show out west will be live on YouTube about 15 minutes or so following the game, where I'm going to come on. I'm going to be talking my main takeaways, top performers. We're going to break down the box score maybe a little bit, and then that's where you come in. That's where you come in with your text, with your phone calls on the TSOW Talk and Text line. Really excited to kind of interact back and forth. 541-357-6390. And you can send your text now. You can send your voicemails now, and I'll read those coming up on the show throughout the season. I'm so excited about the offerings here at TSOW. Man, I am just brimming with excitement. I want to go out there. I want to run some drills in the backyard. That's how excited I am, but we got to get into the rest of the show here. Let's get it going. I don't know if it's just this early preseason optimism that we get as college football fans where, hey, everything's going to be sunshine, unicorns, and rainbows. We're going 12-0. We're having the Heisman Trophy winner. We're having this many all-conference guys. We're having this many all-American guys. I mean, we get excited. Christmas is a week away, and today feels certainly like Christmas Eve. But the more that I dive into this Oregon team, the more I absorb from others about this squad, and the deeper that I continue to dive into this roster, the more I get convinced, and the more I believe that, man, this is a team that can win multiple playoff games. This is a team that can make a run. Everybody's looking towards 2026 as maybe being that championship team where finally the 0 gets turned into a 1. But, man, it's just the closer that we continue to get to Montana State, the more I believe. And I'm not the only believer. Josh Pate recently dropped his 12-team college football playoff bracket predictions, and he's got the Ducks making a run all the way to the national championship game. Mind you, we talked about it on the last edition of TSOW, Josh is the guy that's seen the Ducks practice. Josh is the guy that's seen the Ducks scrimmage. and he's got them falling to Alabama in the national championship game. That would sting a little bit, losing to the combination of Kayla DeBoer and Ryan Grubb once again. But to be able to make it to that point, what do you need? What do you need? You need difference makers. You need dudes. You need players that can just take over a game any given week. Now, I've got 7, by the way, on my list that I'm going to be talking about here in just a minute. But I think a lot of it has to do with what position you play. I think certain positions are more apt and are just in a better position to take over a game and be that difference maker and maybe sway a loss into a win more than others. Like, here's an example. Let's talk about Josh Connerly. Josh Connerly, late first-round draft pick, multi-year starter at Oregon, fantastic player, right? Maybe his best game as a Duck was the Big Ten championship game, where he's matched up against Abdul Carter, a future top 5 pick in the NFL draft, now with the New York Giants, and he just absolutely stonewalled him. And he did a phenomenal job at keeping him at bay. Like, he had that difference maker. He had that dude type of performance that you would think out of the offensive tackle. But this was still a Penn State team that had the football, a chance to drive down the field, tie the game, maybe force to overtime, and to be able to win. So although a position like offensive tackle is really important, and they can play just an absolute stellar and stud of a game, it's maybe maybe there's other positions on the field that can really sway a loss and a win either way than more the offensive tackle. Like Isaiah World, a guy who's taking Josh Connerly's spot, I think could be like a dude as far as like the offensive line is concerned, but in terms of and it's very important. No doubt, it's an impactful position, but I think on offense specifically, it's the guys who touch the ball that are going to really find themselves onto this list. Bryce Betcher is no doubt a great player. No doubt. But when you take a look at like the athleticism and the playmaking ability of maybe some other guys on defense, I just think there's different levels to this thing. I think Bryce is going to be one of the best linebackers in the Big Ten this year. Maybe one of the best linebackers in all of college football. But I think there's other guys that can just single-handedly on defense maybe take over a game right now and are just maybe at a little bit of a different level. Let's dive into my 7. We got to start on offense. And, whether it's Oregon or really any other team, the main difference maker is going to be the quarterback. And that's where I want to start with Dante Moore. Now, where I want to start about what makes him different and why he's a difference maker, I want to kind of compare him a little bit to what we had in 2024 with Dillon Gabriel and where things are going to be different for the Ducks offense. Because I think what Dante's ability, everybody talks about arm talent. Everybody talks about the type of throws that he can make. It's players, it's coaches, it's you and me, it's analysts, it's everybody out there talks about that. And I think where things are going to be different for Oregon this year is I think the offense is just going to be opened up more with Dante at quarterback. When you looked at Dillon, he had a little bit of a longer throwing motion. You watch a little bit more of a windup. You watch Dante Moore on this, watch him in the spring game. You watch him in the Under Construction Fall Camp documentary. He's got some zip on that ball. He gets rid of that football quickly. And I think that's one thing that I think is going to be a little bit different. To be able to have maybe that half a second to get rid of the football, get it down the field a little bit quicker, that's going to make a little bit of a difference. And then the middle of the field. Of course, Dillon Gabriel was a little bit on the shorter side. And considering the shorter side, considering the windup, sometimes, those 15 to 20 yard plays across the middle, that really wasn't on the table last year. Whereas now Dante, with the stronger arm, with the quicker release, with more zip on the football, I think the middle of the field is going to be attacked a lot more, certainly, than it was last season. Look, it's plain, it's simple. Dante Moore can make throws. He can do things with his arm right now that Dillon Gabriel could not do last season. I believe that is the fact of the matter, and I believe that's why Dante Moore is going to be a difference maker, and that's why I believe that this past game, I think, could possibly achieve new levels than it has. It's been pretty good. It's been pretty high. I think when you look at last year with somebody like Dillon, like the Big Ten championship game, people thought, oh my God, bubble screen. People were kind of talking about that, but I think like having a different type of talent and a better type of talent at quarterback is going to cause Will Stein to evolve, and I think it's going to cause Will Stein to maybe really fire this thing down the field and going to have more confidence in the quarterback that they can indeed do that down the field. So no doubt Dante Moore is going to be a difference maker just because I think with his increased arm talent to what the Ducks had last season. Now let's talk about DeCorian Moore, because I think when you combine these two together, they raise the dude factor of each other. Like, DeCorian's ability to get over the top with his speed, run accurate routes, separate from defenders, that's going to make Dante more of a dude, because he's going to have that confidence that DeCorian is going to be open. And then he's going to be able to make those plays down the field a lot more as well. And then having a quarterback like Dante, of course, is going to raise the dude factor of what DeCorian can do. The confidence that DeCorian has that Dante is going to be able to get him the ball exactly where it needs to be on a consistent basis. But when you talk about difference makers, like when you talk about dudes, Oregon's defense has found out firsthand exactly what it means when you have a difference maker and you have a dude at the wide receiver position. Like you look at Washington a few years ago, a guy like Roma Dunze, and then Jeremiah Smith. Like wide receiver is a position. I talked about positions at the beginning of this segment. Wide receiver is a position where it's like, I get it. Football's an 11-on-11 game and you got to work as a team, but, wide receiver is that type of spot where, like basketball, just get the ball to this guy and let him take over. I remember during Ohio State's run last season, just throw it up to Jeremiah Smith, put it in his vicinity, put it in his radius, and he'll make a play. After the game against Oregon, I remember people are talking about the semifinal against Texas and the championship game against Notre Dame, and people are like, they're trying to determine, hey, who's going to win this game? And people would end up saying, well, one team has Jeremiah Smith, and another team does not. Now, I don't know if it's going to happen this season, but I think eventually you're going to get to a point with DeCorian Moore. It'd be like, well, one team has DeCorian Moore and the other team does not. Maybe if they don't play Ohio State or Alabama in the future. They got some pretty good wide receivers certainly over there. Like when I was growing up, I watched the NBA a lot more certainly than I do now, and I remember watching the Lakers. And it was very much just lob it down to Shaq. Get the ball to Shaq and let him dominate in the post. And I think having a difference-making wide receiver talent like Oregon has never seen before, like DeCorian Moore, is going to be the ultimate difference maker for them. And I think his ability certainly raises the ability of Dante Moore. Together, I think they raise each other's dude factor. I know that kind of sounds a little bit funky over there. And I think like DeCorian not only is a difference maker on the field in 2025, he's this potential program changer for Oregon to have that type of elite talent on the perimeter that can take over a game, that can draw double teams on that side, so maybe other parts to the offense are also open as well. And when we talk about other parts to the offense, we got to talk about Kenyon Sadiq. If I'm ranking these, and this is not I'm going offense and then I'm going defense, right? This is it's just in that type of order. But if I'm ranking these 1 through 7, I think my number 1 might be Kenyon Sadiq. There may be no bigger difference maker. There might be no one that has a larger dude rating maybe at the top than one Kenyon Sadiq. I've covered his talent a lot throughout this offseason. But, just his he's an ultimate difference maker because he's just different. Like, Kenyon Sadiqs don't grow on trees. These are rare specimens we're talking about here. Like Brock Bowers is maybe the last guy that we've seen like Sadiq. When you combine his power, when you combine his speed, when you combine his versatility, like he's a matchup problem no matter what happens. No matter where he lines up, he's going to cause a problem. And kind of circling back to Dante Moore and specifically the middle of the field, I think like that's going to be more of a weapon for Oregon this season is having a guy that can truly sling it down the middle, and having a tight end that can work the deep middle, of course, is going to be just another added layer, I think, to this Ducks offense this year. And everybody talks about his ability and his versatility and his explosiveness in the passing game, but man, he is a dude, and he can mash in the run game. On the latest edition of the Under Construction Fall Camp documentary series, Dan Lanning in a team meeting was talking about this is what Kenyon looked like as a freshman, and now this is what he looked now. And he is mashing people in the run game when it comes to run blocking. So that's an added part that when you turn on the television and, the announcers do their kind of pregame segment or their pregame hit, they're not going to talk about Kenyon Siddique's blocking ability. They'll talk about his versatility. They'll talk about what he can be from a weapon in the receiving game. But his blocking is one of the more underrated parts, I think, to his game, and maybe one of the more underrated parts to the Oregon offense. He's just an all-around dude, and he's just an all-around playmaker. I can't wait to see what he can do. I'm going to wrap up offense talking about running back, and I'm going to include Mekhi Hughes. Now, word out of fall camp is that this is maybe Mekhi isn't that bell cow type of guy. Remember what the bold prediction show, I said, hey, this is maybe going to be more of a 1A and a 1B situation. And all of that being considered, I look at the run style of one Mekhi Hughes, and he is a powerful guy. He is extremely difficult to bring down. And I think that's different from what you saw, for example, last season from Jordan James. Now, Jordan James was a really good running back for the Ducks, no question. Over 1,200 yards last season, did a really great job. But when you saw Jordan run, this isn't a guy that would consistently just shed tacklers. But when you look at Mekhi, now albeit on his film from the Group of Five level when he played in the American Conference at Tulane, you look at him breaking tackles. You look at him getting into the open field. Now, once he gets into the open field, he's not the fastest guy in the world. I mean, we're not talking about DeAnthony Thomas. We're not talking about LaMichael James. We're not talking about Kenyon Barner. We're not talking about that type of speed. Mekhi Hughes is very much a straight-ahead power type of running back. And I think where he becomes a difference maker this season, specifically in Big Ten Conference play, when you get into some of these games later in the season, when you get into a game like on the road at Iowa early in the month of November, and you can just keep feeding Mekhi Hughes and feeding him, and he gets stronger and stronger and stronger as the game goes on, I think that's where he becomes a difference maker, where you can wear down a team, or maybe like an early season matchup like Indiana, okay, where both teams can be explosive with their passing. He's going back and forth, and Will Stein's be like, all right, we got to slow this game down a little bit. When we got to wear down an opposing defense and be out there for a long period of time, win the time of possession, just grind teams down and wear teams down, that's when Mekhi Hughes, where he could get 25 carries in a game. He could get 28 carries in a game, and it just becomes tougher and tougher and tougher to be able to bring him down as that game really progresses. I think that's where Mekhi Hughes can truly be the difference maker this season. Let's move over to the defensive side of the football, and I want to start coming off the edge with the guy who led the Big Ten in sacks during the regular season, and that being Mateo Uiagalelei. There is no doubt that this guy is a difference maker. There is absolutely no doubt that this guy is a dude. Now, I'm going to be talking about two guys that are just like, put it on the wall of examples that when you talk about Duck development, when you talk about guys that have raised their game and raised their profile each and every single year, these are the guys that you're plastering on that wall. Mateo is one of them. I mean, last year he took a big jump from his first year in the program, and he was really good, no doubt, last season. I mean, Mateo had sacks in 9 of Oregon's 14 games last season, but I think this season he's about to take this thing to a totally different level. And he's obviously a fantastic talent. He's obviously a dude. He's obviously a difference maker. But I think where he is really going to shine this year is when the other guys at his position also flex their muscle. I've talked about this before, where I think there's just so much depth and so much talent at the edge position. Like when you double team Mateo on one side, he's really creating a lot of pressure. He's really wreaking a lot of havoc. Now all of a sudden you create a one-on-one matchup for Tatum Tuioti, for Blake Purchase, maybe Ashton Porter, maybe Elijah Rush, and all these guys, and maybe guys that aren't getting the most attention right now. But once we get 3 games or 4 games into this thing, and now these guys on the other side are creating havoc, teams are gonna be like, oh crap. Now we got to shift things back to this side. And when Mateo gets one-on-one matchups, that's where he's going to have the potential to break the Oregon single season sack record. I truly believe that. So Tosh Lupoi, I think, in his defensive game planning, I think he's going to do everything possible. He's going to work his depth so you get more one-on-one matchups with Mateo. I think that's exactly where Oregon wants to shift this chess match as the season goes along. Man, it just gets me excited of the havoc that could happen with Mateo in one-on-one matchups consistently throughout the season. Also on the defensive line, boy, it helps you. The thing is, why, Ted, why do you believe that this team could make this type of run that you talked about at the beginning of the segment? Well, it certainly helps when you've got 2 dudes and difference makers on the defensive line. Amari Washington, 6'3", 338 pounds, number 4 on Bruce Feldman's All Freaks list. Check out these numbers. Squatted 755, benched 475, he cleaned 385. He's running nearly 21 miles an hour at top end speed and a vertical jump of 36 inches. All of those numbers are insane and they don't make sense together. When I first, and Bruce Feldman said this in his article, he's like, I had to do a double take. This seemed like a typo. And Amari Washington just seems like a typo. This guy is a freaking alien, right? He played in every game last season, and I think where he becomes a dude is plugging those run lines, is consistently making life difficult to be able to run the football up the middle. Mateo's going to make the difference, I think, coming off the edge, consistently in a one-on-one matchup in a pass rush situation. Amari, I think, is the guy that's going to be the difference maker in the middle when you talk about running the football. And then, it's a numbers game sometime when you talk about offensive line versus defensive line. And now when you talk about this numbers game, it's like, okay, well, Mateo's getting pressure in a pass rush situation. Okay, well, maybe we got to double team him. But now Amari is just wreaking absolute havoc. Now we got to double team him. There's not enough guys on the offensive line to be able to double team. Okay, so that's the great thing about having so many great players on the defensive line is eventually one of those 2 players is going to have one-on-one matchups pretty consistently throughout the season. So if Oregon can kind of isolate that, I think that they are going to be in a tremendous situation. I haven't talked a bunch about Amari Washington, but that doesn't mean I don't believe in the kid. I think he's going to be an all-conference player at the very, very least. That's how high I am on him. I love this defensive line, but this is not the first time I've certainly said that. Last one that I want to talk about today is Dylan Thieneman. I mean, Dylan has the ability to just do everything. And it's maybe something that Oregon hasn't had. It's been very different from what Oregon has had at the safety position in years past, probably since Javon Holland. Look, all due respect, Tysheem Johnson, Kobe Savage, somebody like Steve Stevens, there's a reason why in some of these bigger games against some of these teams that can throw the football a lot more, that the results have gone down the way they have. It's because they don't have a safety back there that has that type of talent against the other talent that was across the field in some of these games. But Dylan Thieneman is certainly that talent to be able to get the job done. He can be an extra run defender in the box, and he does a really good job on his film to be able to sniff out runs, especially to the outside as well. He's skilled enough. He's athletic enough to run with wide receivers. That kind of goes back to the point that I just made over there. And his experience and his intelligence, I think, are enough to captain everyone else around him and get everyone in the right spot. Sometimes half the battle is just alignment, getting in the right spot. That was the Rose Bowl. Remember, everybody's Oregon is moving around, they're looking side to side, and then Ohio State snaps the ball and everybody's out of position. Having an experienced guy like Dylan Thieneman back there that's played in a lot of football games the last 2 seasons, I think is going to help tremendously and be even outside of just his talent, but his intelligence kind of rubbing off on other folks, the younger folks in the secondary, I think is going to be a big-time difference maker for the Ducks. I'm starting to believe, folks. We'll see if maybe I'm just drinking the green and yellow Kool-Aid right now, but I think there's difference makers on this team, and I think a big reason why I believe Oregon could make the championship run is because they got dudes all over the field. Remember your credential, grab your reporter's notebook. It is time to take a trip into the press room with the TSOW Press Pass, the inaugural edition of the TSOW Press Pass. I'm going to watch all of the press conferences from Oregon coaches and players, certainly throughout the week. And then I'm going to come back in this segment. I'm going to clip off the handful of sound bites that really stood out to me, and then we'll dissect them together. First one that I want to tackle is from quarterback Dante Moore. When asked, what do you feel separates yourself from other quarterbacks in the Big Ten?
Of course, when you look at the Big Ten, there's going to be, of course, quarterbacks that have been, more experienced than me. And one thing I will say is I feel like my preparations just this year is going to be, off the roof. I mean, having Dylan last year and seeing the way he prepared and the way he just, took, many great checks into the field and put our team in, great positions. I feel like I learned a lot from him. And I feel like this year one thing that's going to separate me is, of course, every quarterback can throw the ball. Every quarterback can make a right check. But I feel like just the preparation, understanding what the defense is going to bring in that game. So I feel like my separation is my preparation.
First thing, when I watch and listen to Dante Moore speak, he's got that quiet confidence about him. He's got that silent assassin about him. But his coaches and his teammates also say he remains humble. Last season was very much an educational experience for one Dante Moore. And that soundbite, along with others that we've heard from Dante since the spring, has really showed us that he has absorbed a lot of information. And that is like you can, like he said, every quarterback can throw the ball. Like we can, and we've beaten it into oblivion. Just the arm talent and what Dante Moore can do throwing the football. But I think it's all between the ears. I think it's all about the mental side. If he has really evolved in the decision making since his freshman year at UCLA to now his third year in college football over at Oregon, just working within the system that Will Stein asked you to work within. I mean, this Oregon offense is so predicated on taking care of the football, ball control, just setting up your playmakers to make plays in space. Now, I've mentioned many times before, I think Dante's ability adds a layer to what Will Stein is going to call and how he's going to structure this offense this season. But if Dante has truly, being able to learn from a guy who has played more college football than anybody, he did something last year that 90 to 95% of quarterbacks in his position, maybe even more than 95, would not have done. That takes a ton of maturity. And if you want one trait from your quarterback, it's maturity. And then having a guy like Dylan to learn from that has done it, he's seen it, he's been through it all at different levels of college football, that might be as big of a factor in Dante's success than anything. Let's hear from offensive coordinator Will Stein when asked who has been standing out as one of the most consistent performers in fall camp at the wide receiver position.
Gary Bryant is one of the most consistent football players I've ever been around. He's a complete pro. He does everything you ask him to do. He blocks his ass off. He runs routes at the specific depth. He catches the ball, makes plays, good with the ball in hand. I was really saddened that he couldn't have an impact on our team like he wanted to, like we wanted to last season because of injuries. And I would have loved to have him, Tez, Trayshawn, all those guys out there, Evan working together. But obviously injuries plagued him last season. So I think he's in a great spot mentally, physically. He's super gifted. The guy's made plays here in 23. I think he had 40-something catches, 500 yards. So I remember the Arizona State play in 23 where he threw him a swing and he makes multiple people miss and takes it 65 yards to the house. So he's extremely consistent, and it starts with his prep. He's definitely, I would say, the leader of that group, and not just vocally, but just how he approaches every single day.
I think it says a lot, because everybody wants to know, okay, who's going to step up at wide receiver? After the injury to Evan Stewart, there's all these guys in this room that are looking to make an impact, and everybody's looking for that nugget and this nugget, looking for all that intel to be like, okay, who's going to be that guy? For Will Stein, without any hesitation, to say, boom, Gary Bryant, that tells me, and I'm very confident, that Gary Bryant is going to be the starting slot receiver when this thing gets going. I think DeCorian Moore is going to be at the X on the outside. I think Gary Bryant is going to be the slot from day one. And then I think it's just up to who's going to be the other outside receiver on this team. But like Will said, he's produced. This really shouldn't be much of a surprise because when you look at that guy in the slot, I think that you're looking for a guy that you can depend on. You're looking for a guy that on a 3rd and 6 that can just run a very precise slant route or a quick out route and keep the chains moving. And I think that's what Gary Bryant is. He's got a lot. If he is really back to full health and back to, I think, what the old Gary Bryant is, he could be a really big weapon in the open field and maybe that short to medium pass game for the Ducks. And really, it shouldn't surprise you that he's the guy that is the most consistent because, when you've played as much football as he is, the more you practice and the more you play, the more consistent that you're going to be as that veteran. And I think you got to have that guy that I think everybody can look up to and be like, you know what? We know that guy is going to come up with a play. And I think that guy this year is going to be Gary Bryant. I want to close out the TSOW press pass. Very interesting soundbite. That actually has a lot of tentacles. I think I could go a lot of different ways with this one. But this was Dan Lanning talking about the growth of his team throughout fall camp.
This team has grown. I think, early in the offseason, I was talking about where's the leadership going to come from. There's a lack of experience, but I would always give me talented players over guys that have a ton of experience that aren't talented. So we have talented players that maybe don't have as much experience, but in this last month of practice, they've gotten a lot of experience. Over the summer, they've gotten a lot of experience. And then we've seen leadership show up. So that gives me a level of confidence going in this season with, the group that we have.
If you're good enough, you're old enough. We've seen Dan talk about that. And if this team really continues to grow, this team, I don't know where the ceiling is. I truly believe that. Like, here's a comparison that I want to make when he talks about experience versus talent. And this year, in so many different ways, we've talked about this many times during the offseason, that this year is kind of this show, right? This is the bridge from fall camp to game one. But this season is kind of the bridge from where Oregon has had to use a good amount of like stopgap transfers as impact players to where now you're going to be starting to see a lot of the more recruited players really take a run at it. I want to use an example. I want to talk about Illinois. Illinois is a team that a lot of people are high on right now because look at all this returning production that they've got coming back. And that's great. I think Illinois is going to be a really good team. They deserve the ranking exactly where they're at right now. But here's the thing about Illinois. For as much returning production as they have a ceiling. I think that I think Illinois can make the college football playoff. I don't know if they can win a college football playoff game. But then you look at somebody like Oregon that is much less experienced than a team like Illinois, but their talent level is so much higher. Once this team gets 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 games under their belt, okay, they're not going to be true freshmen anymore. They're not going to be second-year players. Now they're going to be second- and third-year players, really, at that point in time. And then the talent is going to take care of itself. Oregon, they are seeing the fruits of their labor right now on the recruiting trail really pay off during fall camp, and I cannot wait. This was probably the soundbite that stood out most to me because when you listen to Lanning is very much that like Saban and Belichick where he doesn't give anything away and he's generally not, glowing about his football team at this point in time, but not only this soundbite, but others, he's very optimistic in this team. He's very optimistic, and he's saying it publicly, which is something that should really reverberate through this Oregon fan base and grow the optimism as we look towards week 1 of the 25 season. We are making progress across this bridge of a show from fall camp to the start of the regular season. You can hear it getting a little bit louder now, can't you? You can hear shout. You can hear coming home. You can hear the roar of the crowd over there at Autzen Stadium. You can see that Bobcat logo getting a little bit bigger as we continue to get closer to that point. But before we totally get across the bridge and before we finish this program, you look beneath your feet, you see a whole lot of Columbia River. We got to take a look back. we got to take a look back at where we came from, and that being fall camp. Of course, I was gone the first 2 weeks of fall camp, so this is really the first and the last opportunity to talk about fall camp. Max Torres and Justin Hopkins have been dropping some good nuggets. They've been dropping some good intel about what they've been hearing from their sources over at ScoopDuck. Of course, I'll be a part of that team writing this year. Brandon Gibson is also on the team, really excited about what's happening, a part of the On3 and the Rivals Network over there. But there are three main nuggets. There are three main things and three main takeaways that I want to talk about of some of the intel that's been dropped over there at ScoopDuck lately. Now, number one might be the biggest one. Are we in store for a true freshman takeover? Now, before I give my perspective, I want to give the perspective from old Dan the Man.
You know, it's a group that's gotten a lot of opportunities, right? But the way we practice what we do, it gives those guys an opportunity to go get involved and get on the field if they know their job. And I'll say this group is a group of perfectionists. They want to be right. They want to be great. They get frustrated when they mess up, and they got to realize that that's part of the process. It happens, right? As a freshman, you don't make every single play, but can you learn from those mistakes? That's the key. And I think you'll definitely see some out there making an impact for us this season.
Definitely see some out there making an impact this season. Boy, you know, Dan's not maybe one to give a ton of glowing reviews in press conferences, but that's about as glowing of a review as you can get for a true freshman at this point in time. All right, let's dive into the intel a little bit. Let's start first on the defensive side and the secondary. We know how great and how talented this 2025 class, these four guys coming in, was going to be. And I think if following spring and through the summer, a month before fall camp, you would say, hey, throw me out a couple of names that you think are going to really make an impact this year. You probably would have started with Trey McNutt over at safety. Heard some good things throughout the spring. Of course, he's injured. Hopefully, the Ducks can get him back towards the end of the season. And, of course, Neem Offord. Now, Neem Offord is still going to make a big-time impact, and he is still being talked about a lot. But he's kind of like gotten into that like Decorian Moore stratosphere where it's like, yeah, duh. I mean, of course he's going to make an impact. So maybe people don't mention him as much. But one guy that's been talked about a lot is Brandon Finney. According to one of Max Torres' sources, he's been saying Brandon Finney has a chance to start this season. Finney, 6'2", 203 pounds, coming out of the DMV, Maryland area, traveling across the country to be a Duck this season. And like this year with these talented true freshmen and maybe some of the more experienced guys, it created an interesting melting pot in the secondary, because I think when all these careers are said and done, these true freshmen that are coming in, they're going to have the better careers of maybe some of the experienced players that are on the roster this season in 2025, you know, like the Kennedys of the world, the Theron Johnsons of the world, the Jaleel Florences of the world, and so on and so forth. So seeing that talent battle with that experience is just an interesting mix of how this is all going to go together. But if you're good enough, you're old enough. I'll continue to say that. Dan Lanning is going to continue to say that. And like, if these freshmen, if they are the best players right now, they're the ones that you have to get on the field, plain and simple. And when I hear that about Finney, it kind of gets my wheels turning and be like, man, what is the secondary picture going to look like a little bit? Right now is my belief that maybe Ife Odegwu, Theron Johnson are maybe some of the leaders out there at corner. But I think and also dropped within this intel was like, Dalen Austin does not have the star position, maybe locked up as some people thought he would. So the more I kind of think about it and the more these pieces kind of get shifted around in my brain, why can't a guy like a Brandon Finney be the starter at star when this thing gets started? And you have somebody like Theron Johnson over there at corner, or maybe there's a rotation of Finney and Offord at star, or maybe you put Theron Johnson at the star position and put one of those other guys out at corner. Like, you want to put the best three guys in there at the two corner spots, the star spots, and of course the safety spot alongside Dylan Thieneman if you get to that 4 level with Thieneman at the other safety. So I think you're going to see a lot of true freshmen in the secondary this season. You know, we'll see what happens like week 1 versus like week 8. I think once these guys get a lot more experience under their belt, I think you're going to see a lot of them. I think you're going to see Brandon Finney and a lot of Neem Offord at the very least once we get to the middle of the season. Finney's size is something that really intrigues me at the star position, because you know that you need to be able to come up and run support. That's kind of that corner safety type of hybrid role, and that's a big position in terms of maybe playing more near the line of scrimmage. So that's something that could benefit Brandon Finney in the future. Let's talk about offense. Let's talk about true freshmen at the running back position. We know there's two for the Ducks, but one is really standing out, and that being De'Aaron Hill. I mean, his numbers in Illinois high school football last year were just mind-boggling, absurd. But here's the quote surrounding De'Aaron Hill. Quote, he breaks at least one run per day. He's that explosive speed option right now that is standing out within fall camp. Now, another guy with long speed that's a little bit more experienced is Jaden Lamar. I'm very curious. Here's one question, and here's one takeaway that I might have, is when you want to get speed on the field at the running back position, is De'Aaron Hill a guy that's maybe going to step up above somebody like Jaden Lamar? That's, I think, a question that we need to ask right now, because you need to get the best players on the field. When you look at the running back position, I think like the guys that are going to get good run, those top two guys, like the Noah Whittington and the Mekhi Hughes, I think those are really powerful runners. I think those are guys that can break a lot of tackles. But I think if you're looking for that breakaway speed, a De'Aaron Hill is maybe somebody that you want to get on the field. Of course, Dink Riggs certainly has a lot of pop in his legs as far as speed is concerned as well. So I would love to see De'Aaron get on the field early this season. There's been some thoughts thrown out about Jordan Davison maybe being a goal line back as well. I'm all for that. But once again, Jay Harris was maybe that guy that we were talking about that would be in those short yardage situations. So here we find two true freshmen coming in and making noise and making an impact, maybe, possibly, taking time and reps away from more experienced players. Let's go on to the next set of bites and intel. Roger Sailapaga and Jerry Mixon are providing more significant depth at tight end and linebacker, two positions where maybe depth was a little bit in question. Let's talk about Sailapaga at tight end. I remember, was it about a month ago or something like that? Very recently, I had Travis Brookley from Ducks Rising on this program, and I kind of mentioned to be like, tight end seems to be like a position where if you had an injury to Kenyon Sadiq, if you had an injury to Jamari Johnson, you could have a little bit of a question there in terms of depth. If that happens, there could be something that really comes up that's not exactly inviting. But the word out of fall camp is that Roger has been bouncing back big time. I want to give credit where credit is due. I'm a big listener to what, in my opinion, is the number one Oregon podcast out there, that being the QB11 show. QB11, my man, he's plugged in. That dude is plugged in. And he said recently on their offensive preview show that Roger Sailapaga is pushing Jamari Johnson for tight end 2 reps. And now this kind of gets my brain going in a lot of different positions where maybe you could see a lot of 12 personnel packages with 2 tight ends, being end-line tight ends I'm talking about, with maybe Sailapaga on one side, Jamari Johnson on the other side. And what if you split out Kenyon Sadiq in the slot? That's a very unique look, I think, offensively for Will Stein. So just having that depth, I think, provides you with more confidence that if an injury does happen, or if maybe the wide receiver depth isn't as strong as they anticipated, they can trot out more of these tight ends on a more consistent basis. And then we got to talk about linebacker. And here's a quote that J-Hop had in one of his articles. Quote, "It would not surprise me if Mixon started next to Betcher next season." Now, we're all penciling in Devin Jackson. Now, Devin Jackson is coming off of an injury. It sounds like he's on the mend. He's fully healthy from that injury. But we saw Jerry Mixon had a really good spring game. He had a really good spring game. He's experienced. He's been in this program for a number of years. He's developed. He's gotten better every single week. And once again, we're like, well, what's it going to be like outside of Betcher and Jackson? My big question was be like, hey, when those guys come off the field, is there going to be a drop in play? It does not sound like that there is going to be a drop in play when one Jerry Mixon steps onto the field. And that's like, we haven't even gotten to Kamar Mathuti. We haven't even gotten to Braden Platt, who are also in the battle to get some of these reps as well. So I thought this was something that I had in my mind as well. Like, oh, if the injury takes a little bit more from Devin Jackson, maybe that's an opportunity when Devin Jackson wasn't on the field for Jerry to step up and really prove himself. And it sounds like that's kind of the way things have progressed this season. But the depth at tight end and the depth at linebacker Seems pretty good right now. Let's move on to the last one and talk about defensive tackle. And here's a quote as well from Jay Hupp in his last intel update over there on ScoopDuck. Quote, "I would not just assume Alexander starts based on what I've heard." Now, Bear was always going to be a low-risk transfer. You kind of knew some of the trials and tribulations that you went through. We know what the potential was with somebody like Bear Alexander, but it was low risk because of the talent that was in this room. You got to imagine, put yourself in the shoes and in the room of that transfer visit when Bear is on campus. It'd be like, all right, Bear, it looks like your head's in the right spot. It looks like we're going to do this thing. We're going to bring you in, but we got dudes in this room. These dudes are going to push you every single day. You are not guaranteed anything. Like when you have an Aiden Breland, when you have a Terrence Green, when you have a Tion Gray, a second-year Paul Bunyan of a man in Jericho Johnson, when you have those types of players, this is going to be a battle. And I was like, and there were kind of some of the naysayers, well, Bear quit on the team, he did this and he did that. And I'll be like, well, if things don't work out, it doesn't matter because there's dudes in the room. There's dudes already in the room, and there's already a lot of depth over here. So if it's not Bear Alexander right now, that's okay. If it's Aiden Breland, great. Great, quick interior pass rusher that's put on some weight this offseason. If it's someone like Terrence Green or Tion Gray that's seen reps that are huge guys, big bodies, Big Ten bodies in the middle, Big Ten beef in the middle, next to someone like Amari Washington, also great. I think as fans, we just need to sit back and let that take care of itself. I preferred maybe somebody like Bear Alexander because of his experience playing, and of course, his experience with Dan Lanning dating back to 2021. But if it's someone younger and it's someone better, then so be it. You've seen it. I've seen it. Every single college football analyst out there is throwing out their 12-team college football playoff predictions. A lot of duck flavor, a lot of O's in that bracket. You love to see that. You and I both know that this team certainly has the talent to make the playoff, and it's kind of becoming a growing theme on this show. I've got that confidence. I've got that belief that this is a team that once you get to late in the season, once you get the experience under the belt for a lot of these young guys, that this is a team that indeed can make a run. Little bit of a tweak when it comes to the playoff this season. Of course, last year, still 5+7, still 12 teams, of course. But last year, the top 4 conference champions got those first-round byes. Now, this year, it's straight seeding. So it's the top 4 teams in the country are going to get those first-round byes. Now, I've seen Oregon at many different seed lines, many different spots across many different brackets according to many different people. Kind of got me thinking, what's my Oregon playoff preference? Where do I want to see this thing shake out when all is said and done? And it actually starts before the college football playoff of the 12-team variety, before that tournament, before the dance begins. And that being the Big Ten Championship. Last year, I think proved us, both I think when we looked at it from the Oregon perspective and what happened with the Ducks, and then what happened with a team like Ohio State, it proved that like the Big Ten Championship game or the Conference Championship Saturday, it's not the gatekeeper that it once was, right? Because, okay, we need to make it to the Conference Championship game. We need to win that league to get into like the BCS Championship game or to get into the 4-team college football playoff. That's not the case anymore. That's not the case anymore. With 12 teams, all that matters at the end of the season, did you win double-digit games? If you're in a Power 2 league, which of course Oregon's in the Big Ten, did you win double-digit games, and are you playing your best at the end of the year? That's what matters. And I think the more I look at the Big Ten Championship game, it's like that extra game adds a little bit more mileage to you at the end of the season, especially maybe for the loser. I think like both the winner and loser likely. I mean, Clemson out there could be a top 4 team as well, but I think at least in one of these leagues, the Big Ten or the SEC, the winner and the loser is going to get in to that top 4. But like I think a spot you don't want to be in is if you go to the conference championship game, you play that extra game, and then you lose that game. This is what happened with Penn State last year. I suppose they made a run to the semifinals. So maybe I'm talking on both sides of my mouth, but this is my preference, okay? But if you lose that conference championship game, then you got to play that extra game in the first round of the college football playoff. So here's, I think, where I want to see with Oregon. I would almost rather them not go to Indianapolis. Last year, phenomenal year. I think as more time continues to go by, more people are going to appreciate what happened last season, where Dan Lanning marched into the Big Ten. In year number 1, they went undefeated throughout the regular season, won all of their Big Ten conference championship games in those 9, and then won the Big Ten title. Like, I think when we look back at 4 years down the road, 5 years down the road, and we're really looking at Dan and his resume, that's, I think, one accomplishment that is really going to stand out. And it was great, but we don't need it again. This is a young team that just needs to be playing their best at the end of the season. And I would almost prefer that Oregon don't make the trip to Indianapolis because, man, especially for those of you that live in that state, that make the trip to Eugene, I want to see Autzen Stadium rocking in the playoffs, man. I want to see them with a big-time game in the first round of the playoffs. And that means you got to finish in the top 8 in the country. And maybe I wouldn't say it'd be a surprise if Oregon doesn't finish in the top 8, but it was like, it would be a head-turner if they did not finish in the top 8 in the country. I feel very confident. And I feel confident that this team is probably going to end up maybe somewhere between 5 and 8 in the final polls, I think, when all is said and done. Can you imagine the atmosphere? Autzen Stadium absolutely rocking. We know that USC game is going to be rocking late in the year, the final home game for the Ducks this season. But, man, a playoff game, that takes it to another level. Will it get to that Ohio State level? I think it maybe depends on the opponent in the first round, but that would certainly be a spectacle at Autzen Stadium. I think seed lines that I think you really want to get into, and I think these are very favorable seed lines right now. It's that 5 or 6 seed. Right, because if you're the 5 seed, you're playing the 12 seed, which is very likely the group now in this format, which is very likely the group of 5 representative. Okay, so that's the first thing right off the bat. You get a very manageable, you get them at home, and you get, the lowest seeded and worst team in the playoff, and probably, especially if it's a group of 5 team, probably by a wide margin. That provides you a lot of confidence and momentum that you can build going into a quarterfinal matchup. And then the 6th seed as well. Like those 2 teams, if you win, you either play the number 3 seed or the number 4 seed. So you're not playing one of the top 2 teams of the country, which likely means you're not playing the Big Ten champion or the SEC champion is most likely how that would go down. So you get a better draw, I think, once you get to the quarterfinals, certainly as well. Like you can, and then I think most of all, above all, we can talk about seed lines, we can talk about matchups, we can talk about home games, we can talk about away games until we're green and yellow in the face. Above all, you got to save your best for last. And I've talked about this before. This is a team that I think is going to continue to get better and better and better and better as this season goes along. So my preference, and I'm sure it's your preference as well, is for this team to really be firing on all cylinders when all is said and done. Take care of business, lay the hammer at home in the first round of the playoffs, gain that momentum. I know, because it's 3 weeks from what would be the last week of the regular season to a first round game, and then from like a conference championship game to a quarterfinal game. I think it's 3 weeks and then 4 or 5 days. So you have one less week to prepare for that first game, but it's huge. That momentum is huge. When you're sitting at home for that extra week, for that long of time, that long layoff, I think that's something that we got to fix in the college football calendar. But hopefully Oregon can take advantage of a first-round playoff game and maybe use that to build some momentum and go on a run late in the season. I can't wait. I can't wait, folks. We're standing now. We started at one end of the bridge. We looked down in the middle. We saw the Columbia River. And, folks, we have made it. We have made it to Eugene. We crossed Run Bridge, and, well, now we're going to cross across the Willamette River on the beautiful walk up to Autzen Stadium. But, folks, it is officially game week. Let's get excited. Let's start yelling, shout. Let's get a little bit louder now. Let's get all that energy. Let's feed in all that energy because, man, I am harnessing right now. Next week, Monday and Thursday, going to be breaking down Montana State, going to be breaking it down what the Quack has to attack to come out with a strong performance against the Bobcats. So, until next time, boy, I can't wait until next time. But until next time, I'm Ted LaRue. This has been That Show Out West.